Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So we are reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter number 4 entitled Transcendental Knowledge, and text number 35. Yajkyatva napunamorham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshani jakshasyatmanyato mayi yajkyatva napunamorham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshani jakshasyatmanyato mayi yajkyatpanapumarmoham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshani jakshasyatmanyato mayi. Yajkyatpanapumarmoham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshani jakshasyatmanyato mayi. Yajkyatpanapumarmoham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshani jakshasyatmanyato mayi. Yajkyatpanapumarmoham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshani jakshasyatmanyato mayi. Yajkyatpanapumarmoham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshani jakshasyatmanyato mayi. Yajkyatpanapumarmoham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshani jakshasyatmanyato mayi. Evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshani jakshasyatmanyato mayi. Yajkyatpanapumarmoham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshani jakshasyatmanyato mayi. Yet, which gyatva, knowing, na, never, punaha, again, moham, to illusion, evam, like this, yasyasi, you shall go, Pandava, O son of Pandu, yena, by which, bhutani, living entities, Ashay Shani, all, Drakshasi, you will see, Atmani, in the Supreme Soul, Atau, or in other words, Mai, in me. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never again fall into such illusion. For by this knowledge you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. Please repeat. Having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion. For by this knowledge you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. Purport. The result of receiving knowledge from a self-realized soul, or one who knows things as they are, is learning that all living beings are parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. The sense of an existence separate from Krishna is called Maya. Ma, not, Ya, this. Some think that we have nothing to do with Krishna, that Krishna is only a great historical personality, and that the Absolute is the impersonal Brahman. Factually, as it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, this impersonal Brahman is the personal effulgence of Krishna. Krishna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the cause of everything. In Brahma Samhita it is clearly stated that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. Even the millions of incarnations are only His different expansions. Similarly, the living entities are also expansions of Krishna. The Mayavadi philosophers wrongly think that Krishna loses his own separate existence in his many expansions. This thought is material in nature. We have experience in the material world that a thing, when fragmentally distributed, loses its original identity. But the Mayavadi philosophers fail to understand that absolute means that 1 plus 1 is equal to 1, and that 1 minus 1 is also equal to 1. This is the case in the absolute world. For want of sufficient knowledge in the absolute science, we are now covered with illusion, and therefore we think that we are separate from Krishna. Although we are separated parts of Krishna, we are nevertheless non-different from Him. The bodily differences of living entities is Maya, or not actual fact. We are all meant to satisfy Krishna. By Maya alone, Arjuna thought that the temporary bodily relationship with his kingdom was more important than his eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna. The whole teaching of the Gita is targeted towards this end, that a living being, as Krishna's eternal servitor, cannot be separated from Krishna, and his sense of being an identity apart from Krishna is called Maya. The living entities, as separate parts and parcels of the Supreme, have a purpose to fulfill. Having forgotten that purpose since time immemorial, they are situated in different bodies, as men, animals, demigods, etc. Such bodily differences arise from forgetfulness of the transcendental service of the Lord. But when one is engaged in transcendental service through Krishna consciousness, he becomes at once liberated from this illusion. One can acquire such pure knowledge only from the bona fide spiritual master, and thereby avoid the delusion that the living entity is equal to Krishna. Perfect knowledge is that the Supreme Soul Krishna is the supreme shelter for all living entities, and giving up such shelter, the living entities are deluded by the material energy, imagining themselves to have a separate identity. Thus, under different standards of material identity, they become forgetful of Krishna. When, however, such deluded living entities become situated in Krishna consciousness, it is to be understood that they are on the path of liberation, as confirmed in the Bhagavatam 2.10.6. Muktir hitvanyata rupam svarupena yudgastitaha. Liberation means to be situated in one's constitutional position as an eternal servant of Krishna, Krishna consciousness. Om Jnanati Vandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Didati Swapadantikam Vandayaham Sri Guruhu Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavanscha Sri Rupam Sahaprichatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakam Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hai Priya Panchakropatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yajgatpana punarmoham evam yasyasi pandava yeda bhutanya sheshani drakshashyatman yatomayi. Having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion, for by this knowledge you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. So this is a very wonderful verse. It gives us the result of acquiring transcendental knowledge. So it's been explained by various speakers on the Bhagavad Gita how Lord Krishna is the perfect preacher. How when he began in chapter 1, he started speaking in chapter 2. When he began speaking in chapter 2, he began speaking on a level that those of us who are illusioned can come to. He didn't immediately say that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he didn't immediately say, you are my servant, serve me. So, gradually as we've been going through the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has been teaching us important knowledge that will help us take up this process of Krishna consciousness. And first and foremost, he explained, we are not the body. So this is part of the illusion that Krishna is talking about in this verse today. Yajgapa na punarnoham. You will never again be put into such illusion. So I found two lectures of Srila Prabhupada where he spoke on this verse in a selection of verses, not on this verse by itself. But he was concentrating on, as he has in this purport also, this illusion, how this illusion is actually so great. The illusion that we're in actually defies logic. As K.C. Damana is explaining, he's quite fond of saying how ludicrous it is, the beliefs of the scientists, how they are supposedly some of the most intelligent people in this complete material world, and yet they are so illusioned that they think that this entire creation can come about from nothing, can come about from an explosion, or from whatever their latest theory is. It's actually quite an incredible illusion, because if you really think about it, and other illusions have also been explained to us. We had back in 14 how the three, attachment, fear and anger, created from three different types of illusions. How when one is attached, one doesn't want to know about God, because one thinks one is God. It's an incredible illusion. We are here, we're surrounded by people, and yet the illusion of the false ego is such that we think we are the Lord of everything. We think that material nature should serve us. We think that all the other people should serve us. Why doesn't the rain stay away and rain only when I'm not out in it? Everything. We think everything. It's an incredible illusion. So, and then the other illusion is we come to realize that we're not the body. We come to realize that there is another level, a level of Brahman. And we think then we are that Brahman. This is where the impersonalists want to merge into Brahman and lose their existence. But the Mayavadis want to come into Brahman and become Brahman. They want to become the Lord. They have some really concocted ideas that all this world we're living in is a figment of their imagination. And they simply imagined the complete variety in the material world, all the variety of different species, all the variety of situations, earth, in the sky, in the water, in the outer space, the different living entities, the different trees, the different type of flowers. They think they imagine it all. And then what's more, they think when they become purified, they'll simply go back into being Brahman, into being nothing again. So what was the purpose of their imagination? They can't actually tell you. So those different types of illusions that were explained in 14, Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha, how when one is attached, one doesn't want to know about God. How when one is fearful, one wants to lose his existence into being impersonalist in the Brahman. And when one is angry, one wants to become the Supreme, become the Absolute. So in another part of this illusion explained here in the purport by Srila Prabhupada, and also in his classes, is understanding that we are qualitatively one with the Supreme, and therefore thinking we are the Supreme. So Srila Prabhupada gave the example of a finger. He said, if someone touches your finger, you can say, don't touch my body. But actually the finger is only part of the body, it's not the whole body. So he's explaining the other analogies that he gives again and again is like the gold in the gold mine, or the drop of seawater compared to the Pacific Ocean. The quality is the same. But having seen the drop of seawater, you can't say you have experienced the Pacific Ocean. You know the quality of the Pacific Ocean because you've tasted the drop and you know it's salty. But you can't say you've experienced the Pacific Ocean. So significantly, as we've been coming through the Bhagavad Gita, as so many speakers have explained, Krishna has been leading us from a point where those of us who are conditioned, who are envious, who are illusioned, are able to understand slowly. Enough, when we come to the 3rd chapter, Krishna is engaging us in some service. He says, sacrifice for Vishnu must be performed. So by this he's engaging us first in the prescribed duties in the Vedas, engaging us in this service. And then in this 4th chapter we begin to learn that this service is meant to come to transcendental knowledge. So this service is described as puta, which means purifying. This is in 14. Puta bahavo jnana tapasa puta madbhavam agata. So by knowledge, by tapasa, which means by engaging in the prescribed duties, this becomes purifying, and then we come to know the transcendental nature. So Krishna has described these many different types of activities by which we may become purified. We also had this nice verse in the purport somewhere. Yeah, in the purport to 14 we covered on Saturday. Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangha Ta Bhajana Kriya Tato Nartana Vritisya Tato Nishta Ruchistataha Atta Saktis Tato Bhavas Tata Premna Yudanchati Sarakam Kayanam Ayam Premna Pradubhave Pravikramaha. So this progress of our development through the Bhagavad Gita is also meant to develop us as coming through. Ado Shraddha. In the beginning we have a little curiosity, so we start learning the Bhagavad Gita because we have some idea that there might be something different from the material world. There might be something better. Actually the material world is designed so that we want something better. Krishna describes it as Dukkhalayam Shashvatam, which means it's a place of miseries and it's impermanent. So this is meant to inspire us to look for something better. So this, in the beginning, Ado Shraddha, is simply an inquiry. There must be something better than this material world. And then Tata Sadhu Sangha. So first by inquiry, we start to look for somebody who has the answer. So we find sadhus and we associate with the sadhus. And then Bhajana Kriya. So this is what Krishna has been describing in the 3rd and 4th chapters. We've just finished this process of sacrifice. Bhajana Kriya means under the guidance of these devotees who are guiding us, they will engage us in activities which are our purification. And by that, this puta, this purification, tato narta navriti syat, anarta navriti, getting rid of unwanted things, will take place. So then yesterday's verse, we've been covering for a few days, is an essential part of this Bhajana Kriya stage. In the translation by Srila Prabhupada, Bhajana Kriya is described as, in the next stage one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instructions the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. So it's very important that this Bhajana Kriya is not that we simply have our own ideas of what we should do and keep on doing them. This guidance of the spiritual master. Maharaj gave a very strong class yesterday about the purpose of the spiritual master. So tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tatpadarshinaha. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So it's very important as I was trying to make it clear earlier, that actually this illusion that we're under defies all logic. So simply by studying the scriptures, or simply by studying even books of great acharyas, we will not come into realized knowledge, because our illusion is such that our illusion will continue, no matter what we read. I was just realizing as we were studying these verses, that even if we come here to class, and we listen to class, but we select, oh, I like this speaker because he speaks what I like to hear. I don't like this speaker because he doesn't speak what I like to hear. Is also a continuation of our illusion. Because we can go through this Bhagavad Gita and take out what we like and say, I understand the Bhagavad Gita, it's like this. But it may not be what the Bhagavad Gita is like. So this is where the importance of Srila Prabhupada established ISKCON for this, the association of devotees and the spiritual master. It's all very important that we don't continue our illusion and just call ourselves devotees, because we can do so easily. I mean, people will often say, if you have a problem, pick up the Bhagavad Gita, open at any page, and you'll find a solution. Which you can. It is good. It's possible. But it's also possible to continue our illusion that way. Just find the pieces we like and don't take the pieces we don't like. I mean, that's how the Mayavadis get their concocted speculations on the Bhagavad Gita. They take the verses that suit their philosophy and they just put aside the verses that don't suit their philosophy. So this is the process of Sadhu Sangha and Guru Vashrayam, taking shelter of the spiritual master. So Maharaj yesterday was telling us, if the spiritual master doesn't correct his disciple, then he's not a bona fide spiritual master. But you'll find that Srila Prabhupada was at times more gentle than that. I was doing some research because I'm running an ashram and I've got some women staying with me, so I was doing some research onto what Srila Prabhupada says about Brahmacharini ashram. And he says, in some places he says very strongly, yes, in Vedic society there is no Brahmacharini ashram. A girl is under the care of her father, then she gets married at a young age, she's under the care of her husband, and then when her husband gets older, she's under the care of her children. But then in other ones, and it's not a progression, it's not that he said one thing and then changed his mind. They're all about the same time. They're all about 1968, 668. But then he says, but I can see in the West that boys and girls are so freely mixing that I don't want to stop them from learning the transcendental knowledge. In other words, if he lays down a law that people are not ready to accept, then they will just go away. So Srila Prabhupada was actually encouraging the Brahmacharini ashram. At the same time he was saying, no, it's not Vedic, but he's saying, I can see there's a need for it, because it's more important that we make sure there's not free mixing of men and women, because that's completely degrades our ability to take to spiritual knowledge. So this is one of the things that Srila Prabhupada brought in order to make Krishna consciousness available to us in this degraded age of Kali. So he welcomed the Brahmacharini ashrams, and he was very proud of his Brahmacharinis. He was saying how wonderful they were doing. Even they were supporting the ashram itself by various activities. Some of them were painters like Jadharani, and some of her associates were painters. And the sales of the paintings were maintaining the ashram. So it's not even that the ashram was a burden. But he was very clear that he wanted the ashram separate. The male ashram should be separate from the female ashram. But it's an example of how the spiritual master, while he is firm, he is also wanting to lead us according to our ability to receive the knowledge. Like, for example, when he started preaching in America, he didn't immediately say, give up drugs, give up illicit sex, do this, do that. He didn't even immediately give philosophy. He started by chanting in Tompkins Square Park. Yeah, and then he brought them to his place, and he made prasadam for them. And he didn't ask them even for any service. He cooked for them, he fed them, he cleaned up after them, and he just welcomed them back to come back again next week. He didn't even say, come and help me clean up. So the spiritual master is so compassionate that he doesn't immediately try and rectify us. He wants, most of all, for us to establish this relationship, because the spiritual master is this via medium with Krishna. He's the only way that we can get to Krishna. We can't approach Krishna directly. It's not possible. We have to approach Krishna through the spiritual master. And through the spiritual master we're in contact with. We can't be a Ritvik and jump over and say Prabhupada is the only spiritual master for all time. Prabhupada actually clearly says that in his lectures, which is another expression of illusion, that people again will say Prabhupada said, and Prabhupada said maybe once in a certain situation, but if you look at all of what Prabhupada said, you will get the whole picture. So Prabhupada also said very clearly that we need a personal spiritual master who we can approach, as he's explaining in that verse, yesterday's verse, who we can inquire from, who we can render service for, menial service. Not we come immediately and say, I want to become a Sanskrit scholar, teach me. First we offer menial service. So this process, Prabhupada in these lectures, he's always linking these two verses together, which is why I'm going back on them, because they are together. By this process of bhajana kriya, by this process engaging in these activities, under the guidance of the spiritual master, we will come to this knowledge. And it's extremely important. So this knowledge, we are parts of the Supreme. In the translation, in the verse of Prabhupada's lecture, the translation was much more simple than this one. I'm not sure if he had the Bhagavad Gita at this stage or not. This was Los Angeles 1969, and Madhu Dvesha read out the verse, and it says, when you have thus learned the truth, you will know that all living beings are my parts and parcels, that they are in me and they are mine. So yeah, today's translation is a little different. But so in this the original translation, it says my parts and parcels, which is a phrase we know very well because Prabhupada used it all the time. So we will know that we are parts and parcel of the Supreme. So there's one other very famous verse which says a very similar thing, which is 15:7. Mama evam sajiva loka jiva bhutana sanatana mana shastran indriyani prakriti stani karshati. The living entities in this material world are all my fragmental parts and parcels. But something exactly due to illusion. Here we are, we get the right translation. The living entity in the material world The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. So Srila Prabhupada's explaining in this verse that yes, we, and in his lecture also on today's verse, we are parts and parcels of the Supreme, which means that we're the same in quality of the Supreme. He quotes in two different lectures, he quotes different examples of this. Nicho Nichanan Chaitanas Chaitananam. So the Supreme living entity is eternal, and his subordinate living entities are also eternal. The Supreme living entity is conscious, and the subordinate living entities are also conscious. And in the other lecture he quotes Anandamaya Vyasat. As living entities, part and parcel of the superior nature, Supreme, we are always happy. But this verse here, Prakriti Stani Kaushali 15:7, explains because of our conditioned stage, we don't feel that ananda, we don't feel that bliss. So that's an important part of coming to this knowledge. We can come into this stage of bliss. Another place where this progression and development is very nicely explained is in Sri Siksastakam. Chaito Darpana Marjanam, Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam, Sreya Karava Chandrika Vitaranam, Vidyavadu Jivanam, Anandam Buddhivardhanam. So if we go through these, Chaito Darpana Marjanam, by engaging in this process of devotional service, by chanting, particularly by chanting, of course, Sri Siksastakam is by chanting, it begins to cleanse our heart of the dust accumulated for years. Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam. And then it extinguishes the blazing fire of conditioned life. We begin to get relief from material miseries. And so this is not that we're going to get a life free of problems. This Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam means that we will not be affected because we realize we're spirit soul. We realize we're not actually this body. We realize that all these things happening around us are external to our real life as spirit soul. So we become less affected to them. So the fire of conditioned life will be reduced. Shreya Karava Chandrika Vitaranam. So this is, not only does this process of chanting the holy name purify us, not only it gets rid of all our sinful reactions, not only it gets rid of all material miseries, but beyond that, it engages us in the service of the Lord. It engages us specifically in transcendental life, in our constitutional position. And then once we have got this engagement in service, so this again is the Bhajana Kriya. Once we get engaged in Krishna's service, not just in any service, not just work. Somebody, I think it was Maharaj explained in the previous week's class, that if all we do all day is work, even in the temple, without any knowledge, we're in karma yoga at best. So this Shreya Karava Chandrika, we're becoming engaged in Krishna's service. And as a result of that, Vidyavadu Jivana, the transcendental knowledge will come. And then having received the transcendental knowledge, Anandam Buddhivardhana, we start to realize our relationship with Krishna. And we start to attain that relationship because we continue to serve Krishna. With increasingly we get attachment and then taste, and then we come to the higher stage where we won't fall down. Bhava, as explained, Bhava we can fall down from, but when we get to Prem, then we won't fall down. So this Anandam Buddhivardhanam, this ocean of bliss, is ever and ever increasing. Purnamritashvadanam. Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayati Sri Krishna Katsankirtan. So, Purnamritashvadanam means this is the taste that we're always looking for. We're always searching for this higher taste, but we don't know it. So this is the importance of taking a shelter of the spiritual master, taking up this process, engaging in service under the guidance of the spiritual master. Inquiring from him submissively, rendering service, rendering meaning of service, and establishing that relationship. Because by this relationship, we can establish a relationship with Krishna. He can describe to us who Krishna is. He can introduce us to Krishna. And without his introduction, we will not know who Krishna is. So we will find that we are parts and parcels of Krishna. We will never fall again into illusion. Yaj yatma no punarmoham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshani jakshasyatma niyatomai. Having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion, for by this knowledge you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. Okay, so at this time I can see if somebody wants some questions or comments.